just going to talk through how you would get started doing yoga. So you don't need any special tricks. I'm just going to show you some things you might use that you have around your house. So there were just some ordinary cushions. Here's a big fat cushion that's from a sofa. So these are both used to just prop you up. So you can use these most commonly in a seated position like this to raise your hips a little bit. Kneeling on your heels, a lot of people would have difficulty with that. So this can be a position where the cushions are helpful. So you can use the cushions to either relieve the pressure on your feet or your knees. So you can put the cushion underneath your bum, a big cushion or a little cushion. See what feels more comfortable. You also might find it helps to put the cushion underneath your ankles. That takes the pressure off the top of your feet. So these are called yoga blocks. They're not expensive, but you don't really need them. They're just more rigid ways of raising you up. So similarly, you can use them in a seated position. Sometimes it's helpful to have something a bit more rigid, but you could use any old thing you can find around your house to serve that purpose. This is called a bolster. It's a kind of cushion as well, a bit of a more rigid stuffing, and it's used for exactly the same purpose. I quite like using this. They're a bit expensive. You don't really need it. This is called a yoga strap. If you don't have a yoga strap, you don't need one at all. You can just use a belt. You can use anything. I've done these kinds of sessions lots of times in clubhouses and that kind of thing with athletes, and they would use a jumper or a sock if you got a long sock, something like that. Anything. It's actually easier if it's something rigid like a belt. And you can get yourselves into a better position, technically a better position, when you're not forcing yourself to grab hold of your toe or something like that. So that's really useful. Now I'm going to run through a sequence of movements called a sun salutation, and this is almost always in a yoga class, usually at the beginning, to get you a bit warmed up. So some of the key positions. Here, for example, doesn't matter if you can't touch your toes, doesn't matter if you bend your knees a lot. Sometimes the instructor might tell you they want you to keep your knees bent or straight. People will vary in how well they can find these positions. It doesn't matter. You're just where you are and you're trying to get to a slightly better place. You should be familiar with this position. It's really common in yoga as well. So going backwards and forwards from a plank position to a forward bending position can be done in various ways as well. And that's up to you. You don't always have to do what's on the video or what an instructor's doing in a class. You do what works for you better. So, some people wouldn't be able to do that press up type thing. So you can go from your knees. I'm sure most people are familiar with that variation. And similarly, the pushing up, you can do easier and harder versions of that. Now, this position's really important. It's called downward facing dog or down dog sometimes. Now, often people would find this really difficult at the start. This kind of problem is common where you can't get your shoulders in line. Maybe it hurts your shoulders. You can have your knees bent a little or a lot. That might take the pressure off as well. The ideal position is an inverted V. So if you can't do that pose or it's not comfortable, there are two variations. This one is called an elbow dog. I hate it. I find this really uncomfortable, but I've worked with a few people who quite like it, find it easier. This one definitely is easier. It's called puppy dog. So you've got the weight on your knees instead of on your feet. So there's a lot less weight. It's easier to achieve that position. So if you're following a class on YouTube or something like that, you can adapt the positions to where you are. And they wouldn't always show you those variations, but they're there. You can do whatever suits you better. And that you'll find there's a lot of repetition. So you see these movements at the end of the sun salutation are exactly the same as the movements at the beginning. And at the end, it's traditional to finish like that and say the word namaste.